I found the documents on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked inside his briefcase between insurance papers and old receipts. My hands were shaking as I read the words once, then twice, because surely I was misunderstanding. But the signatures were there. The dates matched. And suddenly, 27 years of marriage rearranged themselves into a completely different picture. Like one of those optical illusions where you think you're seeing a vase until someone points out the two faces staring at each other. Only this time I was the one who'd been blind. My name is Claire and I'm 51 years old. I met my husband Thomas when I was 23, fresh out of college with a teaching degree, and dreams that felt both enormous and simple at the same time. He was 26, working as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, steady and reliable in a way that felt comforting after growing up with a father whose moods changed like the weather. Thomas wasn't flashy. He didn't make grand romantic gestures or sweep me off my feet with expensive dates. But he showed up. He remembered things. He made me feel safe. We married a year later in a small ceremony at my parents' church. My mother cried. His mother gave me her grandmother's pearl earrings and whispered that I was the daughter she'd always wanted. I wore those earrings on every anniversary after that, a small ritual that made me feel connected to something larger than just the two of us. Our life together was ordinary in the best possible way. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood where children rode bikes on the sidewalk and neighbors knew each other's names. I taught 4th grade at the local elementary school. Thomas worked his way up to senior accountant, then financial manager. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We took one vacation a year, usually to the beach. We hosted Thanksgiving. We argued about small things like everyone does, whose turn it was to take out the trash, whether we could afford to renovate the kitchen. But we always found our way back to each other. We had one daughter, Emily. She was our miracle baby. Born after 3 miscarriages that had nearly broken us both. I remember holding her for the first time and thinking that everything we'd been through, all the grief and waiting, had led to this perfect moment. Thomas was a devoted father. He coached her soccer team, helped with homework at the dining table, never missed a recital or school play. When she graduated high school with honors, I watched him cry openly in the auditorium, not even trying to hide it. Emily went to college on a partial scholarship. We covered the rest with savings we'd built carefully over the years, cutting back on vacations, driving old cars longer than we probably should have. It was worth it. Every penny was worth it to see her walk across that stage 4 years later with her degree in nursing. She met Jason during her final year. He was a medical resident, ambitious and charming in that polished way that made me slightly uneasy, though I couldn't explain why. Thomas loved him immediately. They bonded over sports and business talk, conversations I never quite felt part of. When Jason proposed after just 8 months of dating, I thought it was too soon. But Emily was radiant, and Thomas was already talking about wedding venues and guest lists, so I pushed my concerns aside and focused on being happy for my daughter. The wedding planning consumed the next year of our lives. Jason's family had money. The kind of money that showed in their clothes and cars and the casual way they talked about their vacation home in Aspen. His mother, Patricia, had very specific ideas about what the wedding should be. The venue had to be a particular country club. The flowers had to be imported. The guest list swelled from 75 to 200 because Patricia couldn't possibly leave out her tennis club friends. Thomas and I had saved $15,000 for Emily's wedding. We planned to contribute that and let her and Jason cover the rest, or let his family help if they offered. But Patricia made it clear, in her subtle, elegant way, that she expected us to match their contribution. $50,000. The number made my stomach drop. That was more than I made in a year of teaching. It was most of our retirement savings. I told Thomas we couldn't do it. We'd give Emily the $15,000 we'd saved, and she could work with that or let Jason's family cover more. It was reasonable. It was responsible. But Thomas looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between shame and anger, and said he'd already told Jason's father we'd match them. He didn't want to look cheap. He didn't want Emily to feel less than. We argued about it for weeks, but in the end, we liquidated investments and took out a home equity loan. I felt sick every time I thought about it, But I told myself it was for Emily, for her happiness, for starting her marriage without the shadow of family tension. I wore my pearl earrings to the wedding and smiled through every minute of it. Even though the champagne tasted like regret, the first crack appeared 3 months after the wedding. I came home from school one Tuesday to find Thomas in his study, which wasn't unusual. But his laptop snapped shut the moment I walked in, fast enough that it felt deliberate. He smiled at me, asked about my day, and nothing about it seemed wrong exactly, just slightly off, like a picture frame hanging crooked on the wall. I started noticing small things after that. He was on his phone more often, but he'd angle the screen away when I walked by. He started working late twice a week, then 3 times. When I asked about it, he said his company was going through restructuring and everyone was putting in extra hours. It made sense. I had no reason to doubt him. Then there were the receipts. I found one in his jacket pocket when I was taking clothes to the dry cleaner. Dinner for 2 at an Italian restaurant downtown on a Wednesday night. I'd eaten alone that Wednesday because he said he was working late. My first thought wasn't suspicion. My first thought was that maybe he'd taken a client out and forgotten to mention it. But when I asked him about it casually over breakfast, he paused just a beat too long before saying yes. It was a client dinner, boring business stuff. I wanted to believe him. I wanted it so badly that I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid, reading too much into normal behavior. But then I found the second receipt. And a third. Different restaurants, always for 2 people, always on nights he said he was working. I did something I'm not proud of. I went through his wallet while he was in the shower. There were more receipts, and underneath them, tucked into the billfold section, was a slip of paper with an address I didn't recognize. Just an address, handwritten in his neat accountant's script. I sat on the edge of our bed holding that piece of paper, and I felt something shift inside me, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before an earthquake. I could ignore the late nights. I could rationalize the phone secrecy. But this felt like evidence of something I couldn't explain away. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I did something that would have seemed impossible to me just months earlier. I decided to follow him. The next Thursday, Thomas told me he'd be working late again. I called in sick to school for the first time in 3 years, drove to his office building, and parked where I could see the exit. I felt ridiculous sitting there with my coffee going cold, like a character in a bad movie. Part of me hoped he really was working late, that I'd sit there for hours and watch lights turn off in office windows and realize I'd been making myself crazy over nothing. But at 6:30, he walked out with a woman. She was younger than me, maybe in her late 30s, attractive in an effortless way with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. They weren't touching, weren't even walking particularly close together. But there was an ease between them, a familiarity that made my chest tighten. They got into separate cars. I followed his. He drove to an apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind of place with manicured lawns and a pool in the courtyard. The woman was already there, waiting by the entrance. They went inside together. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching the light in a third-floor window. And when Thomas finally came out alone, smoothing his shirt, checking his watch, I felt something in me go cold and hard and absolutely certain. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to him in our bed, listening to him breathe, and I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. When morning came, I made him breakfast like I always did. I kissed him goodbye at the door like I always did. And then I went to his study. I'd never snooped through Thomas's things before. It felt like a violation of something fundamental in our marriage, some unspoken contract of privacy and trust. But that contract was already broken, even if he didn't know I knew it yet. I started with his desk drawers. Bills, tax documents, client files. Nothing unusual. Then I opened his laptop. It wasn't password protected because why would it be? I was his wife. We'd never had secrets. Or at least, I thought we hadn't. His email was still open. I scrolled through recent messages, looking for anything from the woman I'd seen, but there was nothing obvious. Then I saw an email from Jason, our son-in-law, with the subject line, Re-Partnership Agreement. I clicked it open. It was a forward of a longer email chain. Conversations between Thomas and Jason about starting a financial consulting business together. They'd been planning it for months, maybe longer. They talked about initial investments, client acquisition strategies, office space. And then I saw the number. Thomas had committed $200,000 as his share of the startup capital. $200,000. We didn't have $200,000. Not after the wedding expenses. Not after the home equity loan. Unless I opened our bank statements. Something I should have been doing all along, but had trusted Thomas to handle because he was the accountant, the financial expert. Our joint savings account, the one we built over 27 years, the one that was supposed to fund our retirement, had exactly $8,000 in it. 8,000, where there should have been at least 150. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely control the mouse. But I kept clicking, kept searching. I found transfers. Regular movements of money from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize, starting 18 months ago. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there. Then larger chunks. 30,000. 50,000. He'd been draining our savings systematically, moving it somewhere I couldn't see. I found the partnership agreement buried in his documents folder. Foster and Miller Financial Consulting. Thomas Foster and Jason Miller. My husband and my son-in-law going into business together, using money they'd stolen from me. Because that's what it was, theft. That money wasn't his alone to invest. It was ours. Our future. Our security. And he'd given it away without asking me, without telling me, as casually as if he were buying a new tie. The woman. The late nights. Part of me wondered if she was connected to all this, or if that was a separate betrayal running parallel to the financial one. In some ways, that seemed almost less important. An affair was a betrayal of our marriage. But this was a betrayal of everything we'd built together. Every sacrifice we'd made. Every year of trust and partnership. I printed everything. The partnership agreement. The bank statements. The email exchanges. I made copies and put them in a folder, which I hid in my car. Then I closed the laptop, put everything back exactly as I'd found it, and went to school to teach 9-year-olds about fractions and proper nouns. As if my entire life hadn't just revealed itself to be built on lies. I didn't confront Thomas that night, or the next. I needed time to think, to plan. Because one thing had become absolutely clear to me as I stood in front of my classroom, going through the motions of a normal day while my mind raced. If I was going to do this, I needed to be smart about it. Thomas was an accountant. He understood money and systems and how to hide things. If I came at him in anger, emotional and unprepared, he'd find a way to explain it all away, or worse. He'd move faster than I could and I'd end up with nothing. So I played the role of the trusting wife. I made dinners and asked about his day and pretended I didn't notice when he slipped out to make phone calls in the garage. And quietly, carefully, I started building my case. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank, one he didn't know about. I started depositing my teaching salary there instead of into our joint account. It wasn't much, barely $3,000 a month after taxes. But it was mine and he couldn't touch it. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. A woman named Susan Chun, who came highly recommended by a teacher at my school who'd gone through her own difficult divorce. I brought my folder of documents. Susan looked through everything with a neutral expression that I would later learn was her professional mask. The face she wore when she was seeing something truly ugly but couldn't let it show. "This is financial abuse," she said finally, looking up at me. "He's been systematically hiding marital assets and making major financial decisions without your knowledge or consent. In this state, that's illegal. Everything acquired during the marriage is community property. Half of that business should be yours." "I don't want half the business," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and cold. "I want what we saved. I want our retirement back. And I want to make sure he can't do this again." Susan nodded slowly. "We can do that. But I need to ask you something important. Do you want to try to save this marriage, or are you done?" I thought about Thomas coaching Emily's soccer team, about him crying at her graduation, about 27 years of shared meals and inside jokes, and the way he used to bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. I thought about the pearl earrings and the promises we'd made and the life I believed we were building together. I'm done, I said. Susan filed the divorce papers 3 weeks later. We'd planned it carefully, timing it for maximum impact. She had everything documented. Every transfer, every hidden account. The entire partnership agreement with Jason. She also filed an emergency motion to freeze all of Thomas's assets and accounts pending the divorce settlement. Which meant he couldn't move money or hide anything else. Before we went to court, the papers were served to him at work on a Friday afternoon. I wasn't there to see his face, but I can imagine it. Shock first, then panic as he realized how much I knew. I was at Emily's house when it happened. Because that conversation couldn't wait. Emily opened the door with a smile that faded the moment she saw my expression. Mom, what's wrong? Is Jason here? I asked. He's at the hospital. His shift doesn't end until 7. Mom, you're scaring me. I came inside and sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything. About the money. About the secret business partnership. About the systematic way her father and her husband had drained our retirement savings to fund their dreams without asking. Without telling, as if I didn't matter. As if my future was theirs to spend. Emily's face went through so many emotions I couldn't track them all. Disbelief, anger, confusion, and something that looked like guilt. That last one worried me. Did you know? I asked quietly. She hesitated just long enough to break my heart a little more. Jason mentioned that he and Dad were talking about starting something together. He said it was just ideas, early planning stages. I didn't know they'd actually done it. I didn't know about the money. She looked at me with tears starting to form. Mom, I swear I didn't know Dad was doing that. But you knew they were planning something and you didn't tell me. It was Jason's business. I thought if it got serious, they'd tell you. I never imagined. She stopped, wiping her eyes. God, I'm so stupid. I should have said something. You're not stupid, I said, even though part of me was angry with her, with everyone. You're loyal to your husband. I understand that. But Emily, this affects you too. That money they used? Half of it was supposed to help take care of me when I'm older. It was supposed to be there if something happened. Now it's gone, tied up in a business that might fail, and your father did it without asking me. What does that tell you about how he values me? About how Jason might value you when you're my age? She was crying openly now, and I reached across the table to take her hand. I'm not telling you this to turn you against them. I'm telling you because you're my daughter and you deserve to know the truth. And because I need you to understand why I'm doing what I'm about to do. What are you doing? Your father is being served with divorce papers today. I'm also filing a legal claim against the business for half the value of the marital assets he invested without my consent. If Jason wants to be in business with your father, he needs to buy out my share or dissolve the partnership. Emily pulled her hand back like I'd burned her. You're divorcing Dad? Yes. But Mom, 27 years, you can't just... I can, I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. Emily, I love you more than anything in this world. But I will not spend the rest of my life with a man who sees me as an obstacle instead of a partner. I will not pretend this didn't happen. And I will not let him take away my security and my future, because he was too ashamed to admit we couldn't keep up with Jason's family's money. She didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," I said. "This is between me and your father. I just needed you to hear it from me first." Thomas called me 17 times that night. I didn't answer. He came home around 9, and I heard his car in the driveway, but I changed the locks that afternoon. Susan had advised it, since legally the house was marital property and I had every right to secure it during the divorce proceedings. I heard him try his key, heard him knock, then pound on the door. "Claire! Claire, open the door. We need to talk about this." I sat in the living room with all the lights off and didn't move. Eventually, he left. I later found out he checked into a hotel. The next morning. He was waiting by my car when I came out to go to the grocery store. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept, his shirt wrinkled and his face unshaven. "Claire, please. Just talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, unlocking my car. "How can you say that?" We've been married for 27 years. Exactly, I said, turning to face him. 27 years, Thomas. 27 years of me trusting you, supporting you, building a life with you. And you threw it away. You stole from me. From us. I didn't steal anything. That was our money, and I invested it in our future. Our future? I laughed, and it came out bitter. You didn't invest it in our future. You invested it in your ego. You couldn't stand the idea of Jason's family seeing you as less than, so you gambled our retirement savings on a business you never even told me about. Do you understand how insane that is? I was going to tell you, he said, and he actually looked like he believed it. Once the business was established and profitable, I was going to show you how it all worked out. I was going to prove that I made the right call. And what if it didn't work out? What if the business failed? Were you going to tell me then, when our savings were gone and we had nothing left? Or were you just going to keep lying until I figured it out myself? He didn't have an answer for that. And the woman, I said quietly. Who is she? His face went pale. What woman? Don't insult me by lying more than you already have. I followed you. I saw you go into her apartment. So tell me, is she part of the business plan too, or is that a separate betrayal? It's not what you think, he started, but I held up my hand. I don't care what it is, I said. I really don't. You've made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I saw him still standing there. And for just a moment, I felt something like pity. But only for a moment. The divorce process took 6 months. Susan was brilliant, methodical, and relentless in a way that reminded me why I'd chosen her. She subpoenaed every bank record, every business document, every email that mentioned money or the partnership. She built an airtight case that Thomas had committed financial fraud within the marriage by hiding assets and making major financial decisions without spousal consent. Thomas's lawyer tried to argue that he'd acted in good faith, that he genuinely believed the business would benefit both of us. But Susan showed the pattern of deception, the secret accounts, the deliberate timing of transfers right before major marital decisions like Emily's wedding. She painted a picture of a man who had systematically manipulated his wife, and the judge was not impressed. The settlement was better than I'd hoped for. I got the house free and clear. I got half of Thomas's pension. And most importantly, I got half the value of his investment in the business, to be paid out over 5 years whether the business succeeded or not. If Thomas and Jason wanted to keep the business running, they had to buy out my share. If they couldn't afford it, they'd have to dissolve the partnership and return the funds. They chose to buy me out, which meant taking on significant debt. I didn't feel guilty about that. They'd taken on debt with my money without asking me. Now they could take on debt to pay me back. The final hearing was on a gray Tuesday in November. Thomas sat across the courtroom from me, and we didn't make eye contact once. Emily came, sitting in the back, and I could feel her struggling with loyalty to both of us. I didn't blame her for that. Jason didn't come, which told me everything I needed to know about his role in all of this. The judge reviewed the settlement terms, confirmed that both parties agreed, and signed the papers. Just like that, 27 years of marriage ended with a signature and a stamp. Thomas left immediately after. I stayed for a few minutes, thanking Susan, signing final documents. When I walked out into the courthouse lobby, Emily was waiting. "Mom," she said, and her voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "This doesn't change how I feel about you. You're my daughter. That's forever." "He's so angry," she whispered. "At you, at the lawyers, at everything. He says you destroyed him." "I didn't destroy him. I protected myself. There's a difference." She nodded slowly, tears running down her face. "Jason wants to know if you're going to come after him legally for his part in all this." I thought about that. I could make Jason's life difficult if I wanted to. I could sue him for his role in defrauding me, make him answer questions in depositions, damage his reputation. But what would that accomplish besides hurting Emily more? Tell Jason I have no interest in pursuing him further, I said. The settlement covers what I'm owed. But Emily, you need to understand something. Your father did this because he was ashamed of not being able to keep up with Jason's family's wealth. That shame made him do something fundamentally dishonest. I need you to watch for that in Jason. I need you to make sure he sees you as an equal partner, not as someone to make decisions for. Promise me you'll pay attention. I promise, she said, and hugged me tight. That was 8 months ago. I'm still in the house, the one Thomas and I bought together all those years ago. I've redecorated, changed things, made it feel like mine instead of ours. The guest room is now my reading room, filled with books and comfortable chairs and good light. I retired from teaching last month, earlier than I planned, but the settlement money made it possible. I see Emily once a week for lunch. We don't talk about Thomas much, though she tells me he's fine, that the business is struggling but surviving. I don't ask for details. That part of my life is over. I've been going to therapy, working through the betrayal, the anger, the complicated grief of losing a marriage even when leaving it was the right choice. My therapist asked me recently if I forgive Thomas. I told her I don't know if forgiveness is the right word. I don't wish him harm. I don't spend my days thinking about what he did or fantasizing about revenge. The legal settlement was my revenge, the dignified kind that doesn't require anger, just boundaries and self-respect. What I've learned is this: trust is not the same as ignorance. I trusted Thomas completely, and I'm not sure I'll ever trust anyone that way again. But I've also learned that I'm stronger than I knew. I survived the worst thing I could imagine happening in my marriage. And I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. The pearl earrings, the ones Thomas's mother gave me, are in a box in my closet. I don't wear them anymore. They represent something that turned out to be an illusion. A family that didn't value me the way I valued them. Maybe someday I'll give them to Emily. Let her decide what they mean to her. But for now, they stay in the box. A reminder that sometimes the most precious things we hold on to are also the things we need to let go. I'm 52 years old. I own my house. I have enough money to live comfortably, to travel, to spend my time however I choose. And most importantly, I have my self-respect back. Your respect back. That's worth more than any business partnership, any amount of money, any number of years spent with someone who didn't see me as an equal. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I've learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full and rich and entirely your own that the people who betrayed you become irrelevant to your happiness. That's what I'm doing now, building, living, and on the days when I doubt myself. When I wonder if I should have tried harder to save the marriage, I remember those documents in his briefcase. The $200,000 he gave away without asking. The apartment he visited when he said he was working late. I remember the choice he made to prioritize his pride over our partnership. And then I pour myself a cup of coffee. Sit in my reading room in the house that's finally mine. And I feel nothing but gratitude that I found the courage to choose myself. If you've experienced betrayal or struggled with difficult family decisions, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories of survival, strength, and finding yourself again. Thank you for listening.